Tesla has been playing chess. A lot of these legacy auto companies, they're just still playing the same old game of checkers. Why does this matter? Well, battery strategy is everything. The excuse right now of legacy auto, they're saying why they can't make lots of EVs is because, well, battery strategy. They got their strategies wrong. This is Tesla's strategic battery strategy and why they will be the world's largest automaker by 2030. Hello, my friends, and welcome to the channel. I'm the Electric Viking. Great to see you. I've had a fantastic time doing this YouTube channel over the last 12 months and learning. When I started this channel, I thought I was an enthusiast. I loved EVs. I loved batteries. I thought I knew a lot. Truthfully, I knew very, very little. And it's been awesome to learn so much new information about what's really going on in the world of batteries. However, the reality is I still have a lot to learn. Randy Carlson, a technical consultant, has shared an article on Seeking Alpha. Yeah, I know, Seeking Alpha, yep. That you need to hear about. I'm going to put a link in the description below to the original article, and I'm going to share this with you and share some thoughts on it as well. The auto industry is entering a steep S-curve disruption. Legacy car makers unable to rapidly transition to electric vehicles will lose market share and risk collapse and bankruptcy. Now, this is very clear. It's very clear by the video I shared yesterday, right? I'll put a link in the description below to that video showing you the percentage of vehicles that legacy automakers will be selling in 2029 that will be EVs. Japan is screwed. I mean, in massive trouble. Only 14% of all Toyota's vehicle sales in 2029 will be electric. The similar story for Nissan and also for Honda. They're the three worst ranking legacy automakers on the face of the earth. Now check out their video to see the percentages and you'll see why legacy auto are about to be disrupted. It's scary for Japan. And I honestly feel for the Japanese people. I think there'll be a significant decline in standard of living in Japan because why? You might be thinking, well, that's ridiculous. You're exaggerating. Come on, Viking. This is over the top. No, it is not. You know why? Japan's economy relies on the automotive industry. It is the biggest employer in the country. The biggest. When they lose 50% or more of that, well, imagine the massive flow-on effects that will have to their entire economy. I am definitely concerned for them. And don't get me wrong, it's not just me saying this. I mean, even the CEO of Toyota has said this. He's the CEO, by the way, of the conglomerate of Japanese auto companies as well. Even ministers in Japan are saying similar things now. Lithium battery supply chains are expanding to support electric vehicle transition. But geopolitical instability and inevitable hiccups will mean occasional feedstock shortages even for abundant elements, especially, right, if you rely on cobalt, nickel, and manganese. What does this mean? Well, LFP high nickel and high manganese cathodes differ in sensitivity to feedstock scarcity. A cathode that delivers the most batteries and cars under supply constraints can impact an OEM's market share dramatically. One manganese cathode delivers more kilowatt hour than LFP or NMC, meaning nickel, manganese, cobalt batteries under supply constraints. Indications are key players will bring this cathode to scale in the near to medium term. Now, Randy says that Tesla will likely make 1.5 plus million electric cars and SUVs in this year, as in 2022, having sold just shy of 1 million vehicles last year. In fact, they didn't sell that many, they delivered that many, they sold more than 1 million. The company says it will make 20 million electric vehicles a year by 2030. Now, that isn't correct, Randy, sorry. The company says that that's their kind of their stretch goal, their optimistic goal. It's not their, I mean, people are commenting on this comment. They're misinterpreting what Tesla said when it said 20 million cars a year. They didn't say they're going to make 20 million a year in 2030. They said they hope to, that would be the upper end of their goal. The company says, but let's just go with this 20 million figure. It's extremely optimistic, and I don't think Tesla realistically thinks they're going to hit it. But anyway, Top car maker worldwide sales in 2021. In a down year, by the way, Toyota, 9.6 million. Volkswagen, 8.9 million. Hyundai/Kia, 6.7 million. General Motors, 6.3 million. Now, consider this. GM was at 10 million for 3 successive years a few years ago. They've lost a lot of market share. Stellantis, 6.1 million. Honda, 4.4 million. Nissan, 4 million. Ford, 3.9 million. And Renault, 2.7 million. Tesla isn't on this list of the largest car makers today. Obviously, they only sold 940,000, only delivered 940,000 vehicles last year. But Tesla will sell more cars, trucks, and SUVs than the two largest car makers, Toyota and Volkswagen combined, in 2030, if they meet this goal. And those 20 million Tesla sales will be coming from others' market shares. Think about that, right? This is going to affect who? Probably the car makers it will affect the most are the ones with the biggest market share right now. Volkswagen and Toyota. Who will affect the most? Clearly, Toyota. I mean, I just mentioned the figure, right? Toyota, 2029, 14% of all their cars will be EVs. Clearly, Toyota is the company that will lose more than any other car company on the face of the earth, unless the other car companies we're talking about just go bankrupt. I mean, that would be a bigger loss, wouldn't it? But I'm talking about actual number of car sales being lost from Toyota to the incumbents, whether that's Chinese electric vehicle makers or Tesla. Randy says that legacy car makers make almost entirely internal combustion engine vehicles today. I mean, that is true. By 2030, roughly half of new cars sold will be electric. This also means that by 2030, the internal combustion gas car market will be about half of what it is today, the other half of the market being electric. Just to keep existing market share, a legacy internal combustion engine car maker will need to switch half of its production to electric vehicles by 2030. There's only one car maker that will actually achieve that based on their current goals. That, by the way, is surprisingly Mercedes. Now, of course, I'm not talking about car makers that already exist in other places that you might not know about. BYD, NIO, XPeng, Geely, SAIC, MG, all these other car companies, Volvo. That's a different story. I'm talking about all the legacy car makers in that top 10 list. So right now, the race is on to see which car makers will transition quickly enough to retain or expand current market share. Sort of like the same race we saw play out when, what happened? The world transitioned from Ericsson, Nokia, and BlackBerry to smartphones. And it was a very, very different market, wasn't it, when that all changed? Very different. Nokia went from having massive market share, having very small market share. Ericsson just pretty almost disappeared off the face of the earth. Who else was a big player right then? BlackBerry, well, they basically went extinct as well. Now, yes, BlackBerry does still exist, but does anyone buy their phones? I don't think so. Some will actually make the jump to this new world. Some won't. And those that don't will lose economies of scale. Likely, they will end up in bankruptcy, or more likely than that, in my view, much more likely, is they will be acquired by other automakers or do joint ventures in order to save one company in order to make the other car company look bigger, have a bigger scale, right? More than likely, Chinese car makers will do what they did with Volvo, buy these companies that are about to go under. What have they done? I mean, Jaguar, Land Rover, Volvo, MG, yeah, the list goes on. That's what's going to happen. Availability of electric vehicle batteries is the key factor that will allow some manufacturers to transition quickly and keep others from doing so. Nobody is going to buy an electric car without a battery to make it go. Battery supply will be limited primarily by the availability of key battery feedstocks, particularly Class 1 nickel and battery-grade lithium carbonate and hydroxide. The Earth contains huge amounts of nickel and lithium, far more than needed for batteries. The hard part is ramping the mining up, getting those metals out of the ground, and then processing supply chains fast enough to meet this EV battery demand within the time frame we're talking about here, the next 8 years. The war in Ukraine and associated trade disruption have crimped supplies of Class 1 nickel used in electric vehicle lithium batteries. Recent COVID lockdowns in China are crimping supplies of battery-grade lithium, carbonate, and hydroxide. Demand for battery-grade nickel and lithium feedstocks is soaring as automakers rush to transition to electric vehicles before their competition. Clearly, they are rushing. It's a race right now between Ford and General Motors. That's obvious. It follows that using battery designs that deliver the most kilowatt hours and hence the most cars per ton of feedstock can prove strategically important as car companies fight to hold and grow market share during this rapid electric vehicle transition. In terms of company survival, the ability of particular cell type chemistry to deliver more cars will relegate battery cost to a secondary consideration, says Randy. Now, I don't agree with that. I personally think battery cost will be the number one consideration. However, let's just go with what Randy's saying and see how this plays out. There are three general classes of lithium batteries that look to be significant for electric vehicles going forward. Iron phosphate, or LFP, high nickel, NCM, NCA, and NCMA chemistries. So there's basically three different types of similar chemistries there. I call those ternary batteries, and high manganese, or LNMO. Now, all those battery types are put in the same bracket of lithium ternary batteries, those four just mentioned. LFP is put into a different battery bracket altogether. Each of these chemistries requires different amounts of lithium and nickel per kilowatt hour of cells. When we're talking about ternary batteries, that is. Lithium iron phosphate batteries don't need any nickel. Choosing a cell chemistry that delivers more kilowatt hour of batteries and hence more electric cars per ton of nickel or lithium feedstock can allow a car maker to deliver more vehicles and hence better defend or grow market share under conditions of scarcity. Newer cathode chemistries that eliminate cobalt and optimize energy density will drive feedstock demand going forward. Now, here's an example of what can be done. GM says that their new Ultium batteries have 70% less cobalt than previous batteries. So clearly that's an advantage. However, in my view, it's even more advantageous to just not use cobalt, period. We need to look at where designers are heading. For instance, high nickel, 90% nickel, rather than NCM 111. And they're also moving to cells with silicon-dominant anodes because this anode choice both increases energy density compared to graphite anode and allows high charge rates. Lithium metal anodes are also being looked at, but these will not become commercially viable for years. Cobalt, while expensive and limited in supply, is being designed out of batteries, as I mentioned before with GM, and likely will not impact new battery supply midterm and onwards. Different cathode chemistries result in different cell voltages, and the higher the cell operating voltage, the greater the amount of energy stored in each lithium ion passing between anode and cathode. More energy per lithium ion means less lithium to store each kilowatt hour. Also, fewer lithium ions means less cathode material, nickel, iron, cobalt, and manganese, and less anode, carbon or silicon. Additionally, some lithium is required for the electrolyte and to form the SEI that protects against undesirable side reactions. Roughly speaking, the amount of lithium needed for the SEI is proportional to the amount of anode material, which in turn is proportional to the amount of lithium ions shuffling back and forth to store energy. Lastly, in the case of high nickel cathodes, a substantial amount of excess lithium must remain in the cathode to support the cathode crystal structure. Remove too much of the lithium from a high nickel cathode, i.e. overcharge the battery, and the layered crystal structure will collapse, resulting in lost battery capacity. This increases the amount of lithium required. It also increases the amount of nickel and other cathode materials required per kilowatt hour, massively increasing their cost. About 30% excess lithium is typically required to achieve acceptable cycle life with high nickel cathodes. Obviously, this creates a problem. The following table shows the amounts of lithium and nickel required for a cell with each cathode chemistry. This data can be used to compute how many 60 kilowatt hour battery packs can be made from each ton of available feedstock. For simplicity, if a manufacturer is building cars similar to Tesla's Model Y, the number of 60 kilowatt hour packs is a rough measure of the number of such cars that can be made. In the case of nickel, LFP requires none and is therefore not constrained by nickel availability. Obviously, high nickel prices are adding to cost pressure for lithium batteries right now that use nickel. High nickel N90 and LNMO cathode do use nickel and are constrained by nickel availability and price. The following chart illustrates the very large production volume advantage that LNMO offers over N90 under constrained nickel supply. Since LNMO and N90 offer similarly high energy density, choosing LNMO cathode for a longer range, high performance vehicles offers a significant advantage. A manufacturer using LNMO rather than a high nickel cathode chemistry can deliver more than 3 times the cars from the same nickel supply. When it comes to lithium, all 3 cathode types are impacted by lithium availability. Again, LNMO offers maximum production volume under constrained supply. A manufacturer using LNMO cathode will be able to deliver more than 3 vehicles for every 2 vehicles that could be made with LFP, and nearly twice the vehicles compared to using high nickel cathode for a given supply of lithium. 4 car makers are currently looking to use LNMO cathodes. There may be others, but we don't know who they are. Currently, Volkswagen, Tesla, Stellantis, and Great Wall Motors are planning on using them. Elon Musk indicated that Tesla's manganese cathode will indeed be LNMO for the reasons so far outlined in this video. Is LNMO ready for the prime time? Is it ready to be production, to go into cars right now? LNMO, also known as HVS or high voltage spinel, has been around as a lithium battery cathode material for many years, but has not been successfully applied. High voltage spinel or HVS has had 2 major drawbacks. Early versions of HVS suffered capacity loss during cycling because the crystal structure rearranged in a way that reduced the battery voltage from 4.75 volts down to roughly 4 volts within a few tens of cycles. This was an unacceptable reduction in voltage. Development of cathode processing that delivers precisely uniform crystal structure, combined with an addition of dopants, has produced HVS that retains crystal structure and voltage over many cycles as demanded by electric vehicle applications. The second problem results from the high operating voltage of HVS cathodes. High voltage accelerates manganese leaching into the electrolyte, which in turn supports parasitic reactions with the battery anode, gas generation in the cell, and loss of capacity. Initially, HVS was thought suitable only for solid-state batteries, where a solid electrolyte would surround cathode particles and minimize manganese leaching. Nano One has worked for several years with Volkswagen on development of LNMO for solid-state batteries. It turns out manganese leaching when HVS is used with conventional liquid electrolytes can be prevented by appropriate coatings. A year and a half ago, Nano One announced that cells with LNMO or HVS coated and stabilized cathode from their one-pot process using conventional carbon anode and conventional liquid electrolyte have achieved 1,000 charge-discharge cycles at room temperature and 500 cycles at 45 Celsius. So what exactly does that mean? Well, it means that this is acceptable for use in an electric car. A number of cathode material suppliers, Haldor Topsoe, NEI Corporation, and Targray are now offering LNMO cathode material commercially as described in an article that I'll link to in the description below. These cathode suppliers are all closely held. Targray is a distributor. NEI Corporation supports nanotech research. Only Haldor Topsoe is aiming for volume LNMO production, planning 100 tons per year capacity by next year. Cathode process developer Nano One is public, but does not offer LNMO or other cathode materials commercially. It is the timing of the first mover that will matter as companies strive to defend and grow their market share. By the time most of the industry has switched to LNMO, the first movers will likely have already pressed the strategic advantage offered by this cathode chemistry to expand market share in electric vehicles at competitors' expense. So who are these likely first movers? Well, at this point, being first mover is not about inventing LNMO as a new cathode, researching whether it can be used in conventional electrolyte cells, or figuring out a process to actually make LNMO. All of those things have already been done. The game is over there. The next and critical move is to make and use LNMO at scale. Only when in use at scale do the strategic advantages of LNMO described above come into play. First movers will be those who get LNMO batteries into their cars at scale before the competition. Now, Randy says that Tesla, with its vertically integrated battery manufacturing, including in-house cathode processing, is best positioned to move rapidly to LNMO cathode, probably for use in its 4680 cells. Tesla has repeatedly talked about their constant quest for nickel and lithium supplies, and implementing LMNO to displace high nickel and even some LFP batteries in their vehicles would offer less constrained growth for this electric vehicle industry leader. This is the path ahead. LFP cells, right? And battery cells that use LMNO. Who's second? Volkswagen seems to be betting the company on electric vehicles. It's investing a lot of money, $200 billion, and it needs to expand vehicle production and its suppliers or in-house battery cell efforts in order to not lose massive amounts of market share. Volkswagen has several years' experience with LNMO development while working with Nano One. Ford, via its partnering with Volkswagen, could well be brought along to using LMNO if and when Volkswagen takes that step. Switching from high nickel or LFP to LNMO is a system-level optimization. LNMO batteries offer almost as much capacity as high nickel batteries and cost only a bit more than LFP batteries. And LNMO has a flat discharge characteristic like LFP and a higher operating voltage than even high nickel batteries, requiring redesign of a vehicle's battery configuration and battery management electronics. A fair bit of work needs to go into making them work in an EV or in an EV that already exists. This makes LNMO more of a compromise choice than a world beater choice on a cost-performance basis. The area where LNMO stands out is in positioning a carmaker to more robustly compete for market share when feedstock supplies are scarce, which they already are. Only a carmaker viewing their strategic business objectives and having insight and control of their deep supply chain will be likely to both appreciate LNMO and take full advantage of what it can provide. A car maker relying on an outside battery maker would have to be sold by the battery supplier and even then be dependent on the battery supplier's supply chain to fully realize LNMO's strategic advantage. Small car makers will likely find themselves in this situation and be less able to expand the engineering resources to switch to LNMO from LFP or high nickel batteries on offer in the marketplace. So what does all this lead to? Well, Randy says the auto industry is undergoing a steep S-curve transition from internal combustion engine vehicles to EVs. Both new entrants and established legacy manufacturers are racing to make more EVs in order to expand, defend market share. At the same time, battery supply is constrained by availability of key battery feedstocks, particularly Class 1 nickel and lithium carbonate hydroxide, as supply chains try to keep pace. A high manganese cathode material now ready for use in EV batteries will allow dramatically more batteries and hence more cars to be made from limited supplies of nickel and lithium. This LNMO cathode competes with high nickel in performance and with LFP on cost, making it literally a game changer. Multiple EV OEMs are evaluating this cathode material, and multiple suppliers are working toward volume production of LNMO. A lot of this is going on behind the scenes. A lot of this you're just not seeing or hearing about. OEMs switching from LFP and high nickel batteries to LNMO will be able to make dramatically more EVs for given supplies of lithium and nickel. LNMO offers strategic advantages to OEMs in the race to make more EVs under conditions of feedstock scarcity will prove to be a key element separating winners and losers in the internal combustion engine to electric transition race. Tesla and Volkswagen appear to be well positioned, or best positioned, to move to LMNO. And I'm talking here at scale. Both companies have included high manganese cathode in their battery roadmaps. Tesla has confirmed that LNMO will be their high manganese cathode choice. Volkswagen has worked for several years with cathode process developer Nano One on LNMO cathode material. In the case of Tesla, Switching to LNMO for some or all of its long-range vehicles that use high nickel batteries could stretch nickel supplies enough to support volume Cybertruck and semi-production. Other OEMs may also adopt LNMO cathode via commercial cell suppliers through the cell cycle, may be more protracted. So as an investor, you should pay attention to which vehicle companies are moving to LNMO or to LFP, because those that do will gain substantial production volume advantage and be better positioned to defend or expand market share as the electric vehicle S-curve disruption continues to its logical endpoint, which is what? The death of gas vehicles. Now, there's one thing I think the author of this article has missed, and that is the enormous advantages we're seeing in the proven energy density of lithium iron phosphate batteries that are going to come out by the end of this year from multiple different suppliers, including Tesla's biggest battery supplier, CATL. Now, you might think, well, they're not Tesla's biggest battery supplier, but I can tell you they absolutely will be, without a doubt, by the end of this year, because Tesla is planning on making huge number of cars with LFP batteries, and their LFP battery supplier is CATL. CATL's lithium iron phosphate batteries, well, have been shown by the company to have achieved incredible energy density improvements. And by the end of this year, those energy density improvements will actually make a huge difference to the calculations here by Randy. I believe that these calculations are based on a lower energy density lithium iron phosphate battery, meaning more batteries are needed for this calculation to work so favorably for LMNO batteries. And yes, LMNO batteries will certainly replace NCMA batteries eventually from Tesla. But eventually, I believe Tesla's battery makeup will be something like this: 70% LFP, 30% LMNO. The energy density increases in LFP will continue, and that will actually take away from some of these cost advantages that we're seeing from these numbers for LMNO. Now remember, Tesla sold more than 3 times more cars than Toyota. Now remember, Toyota sold more than 3 times more cars than Tesla in the first quarter of this year, but it had lower profits in total on way more car sales. The reality is, it's game over for Legacy Auto when it comes to owning the market. It's inevitable that they will lose a massive amount of market share, but clearly this battery first mover advantage that Tesla and possibly Volkswagen also have, and I believe also Chinese automakers, will be enough to disrupt Legacy Auto in a way that will be completely devastating to first world economies. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. What do you think will be the battery chemistry of the future? What are your predictions? Let me know your opinion. Have a great day. Bye-bye.